What I want to do is just cover a couple of things that are in this list because I think they're interesting. For example, the evidence that I thought was compelling were a couple of lines that I thought were really interesting. One is from an astrophysicist who is not a believer, who is named Robert Jastrow. He's been dead for a little while now. He was the director of the Goddard Institute, and he talked about an important line of evidence that's simply known as the second law of thermodynamics. Now, look, I know we didn't come in here tonight to talk about science, okay? Tough. We're talking about science, all right? Because this second law of thermodynamics actually is important to us. And what it really means, and I'll read it to you, is while the quantity of energy within a closed, isolated system, like the universe, remains the same, the amount of usable energy deteriorates gradually over time. In other words, the usable energy is irretrievably lost. It's lost. And as it is lost, increase of disorganization and randomness occurs. Chaos increases. You already kind of know this because you've experienced different simple demonstrations of the second law in your own lives. You see that things don't move from disorder to order. Things move from order to disorder. Things don't become newer and have more energy over time. In fact, just the opposite occurs. Things age and decay over time. And you see this over and over again. Right? If you have any doubts, go home and look at your bedroom. This will prove it to you right away. I mean, everything does this. The fact that we have death, why do you think we don't live forever? We don't live forever because of the second law of thermodynamics. We're not eternal beings. Everything has a shelf life. Let's put this down. How does this help us to demonstrate that the universe has a beginning? Well, let me ask you this. If you came in here tonight and you were the first person to walk in the room, there's nobody else here. You're the only person. It's dead quiet. Yet in the middle of the room, there's a little wind-up police car running around in circles. What's the first thing you're going to look for? Who wound it, right? Because you know this thing does not have endless energy. This thing is slowing down. It's unwinding in front of your very eyes. But that means if it's unwinding, you can go backwards into a time in which there was a point at which it was tightly wound. The fact that the car is running out of energy in front of you demonstrates that that energy had a beginning. Make sense? Well, we're in a wind-up universe that is winding down in front of our eyes, which means if you run it in reverse, we know it's got a beginning in which it was tightly wound. Does that make sense? It's the simplest illustration I can possibly give you for this. Also, though, we know that the universe is expanding, and we know this through the work of many people, but one of which you know probably the best is Edwin Hubble, who in his telescope started to kind of capitalize on concepts that others had discovered, and he noticed something called the law of redshift. Now, what he noticed is if you're looking and measuring light spectrum through of distant objects in the galaxies in the universe, if those objects are moving in one direction, they give you one type of light shift. So, for example, if they are coming toward you, they bend toward blue in the light spectrum. If they're moving away from you, though, they bend toward red. And as he looked out at the universe, he realized that things are bending toward red. In other words, things are moving away from us. The universe is expanding. And why does that matter? Well, think of it this way. If we had a balloon and on there we drew galaxies, as this expands, you're going to see that these are going to start moving away from no matter where you are. If you're here, if you're here, if you're here, if you're in the middle of this whole thing, no matter where you are, each point of data is moving away from you. Make sense? That's what we're seeing. Now, why does that matter? Because let's run the clock backwards. That means there's a point in time in which all these things were tightly condensed. And from that point of cosmic singularity, everything is expanding. So between this and the second law of thermodynamics, we have two good reasons to believe that we are in a universe that is expanding. And therefore, it has a beginning from which it expands. Does that make sense? Let me give you a third thing. It's called radiation echo. I love this because the people who actually discovered this discovered it by accident. Their names are Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson. They built this marvelous satellite dish out of wood. Is that awesome? Here they are years later in front of the same dish. I thought it was pretty cool. They actually got a picture of them. They discovered they were hearing this background noise as they were listening to the universe, and they were trying to get rid of the background noise, and they had asked their friends, what do you think is causing this background noise? And someone said, well, hey, look at your dish, man. It's pretty dirty. Got bird poop all over it. Why don't you clean your dish? So they cleaned the dish. They could never get rid of the background noise until somebody said, well, wait a minute. maybe that noise is not an artifact of your satellite dish. Maybe that noise is something that's really in the universe. It is. It's called cosmic background radiation. We've now, since this time, launched satellites. Here's one, Kobe, not Kobe Bryant, but Kobe, the cosmic background explorer, who this satellite now has actually photographed the background radiation of the universe, and it's pretty uniform across the universe. There is background radiation noise, heat, in the universe, this radiation echo. What could cause that? Well, let me give you another illustration that might help you. You know, I was on SWAT for 3 years. It was the best, funnest time I spent on my law enforcement. Well, I was undercover for 4. That was actually funner. But this was not bad. And if we had somebody who was a barricaded suspect in a room, well, we knew if we were going to just charge through the door and try to get that guy, we're probably going to get hurt because he's going to see us coming. So what we would do instead is we would stage somebody on the other side with a flashbang. A flashbang is a canister, and there's a reason why they call it a flashbang. We're so creative. You know why they call it a flashbang? Because it does 2 things. Flashbang. That's right. That's right. So what you do is you get this guy staged with his hand grenade, basically, and he throws the hand grenade in through a window, and then it's going to explode. And as soon as it explodes, guess what? We're going to rush him from the other side because we're going to have his attention diverted to the noise of the flashbang. And what we discovered when we got inside the room here almost all the time is that once you get in that room after that bang, like your ears are ringing. There's dust everywhere. There's still heat in the room. Why? Because this explosive moment of the flashbang has got a couple of seconds of linger. Follow me? This is what we're seeing with cosmic background radiation. From that singular event of the beginning of the universe, we still have radiation in the universe, which is the afterglow of the singularity. Does that make sense? And we can measure it. And we've tried to explain it any number of ways. The best explanation is it's like a flashbang. It's still there. So now you've got 3 lines of evidence. Let me give you a 4th. This might cause you to stretch a little bit. This might explain how you might have the beginning of space and matter, but how do we explain the fact that we believe we are in a universe in which time also began at the beginning? Really? Time has a beginning? Yeah. You hear that expression all the time, before time began, but they're actually, it's kind of hard to say that because can you use a word temporal, a word like before, if there's no time to measure before with? But the point is, I want you to look at it this way, like a racetrack. This is called the law of infinite regress. Imagine you're on this racetrack, and I put you at the starting line, and I say, okay, get ready, all of you. We're going to have a race. This race is wide enough, the track's wide enough that all of us can run simultaneously. Wouldn't that be awesome? Some of you in this room are really fast. Some of you are pathetic old people like me. I can tell you who's who. I can see all you people, okay? I can tell you who's probably going to win. And what losers are in the room. I tell you right now, I can see you, okay? If you've got gray hair, I'm sorry. You're going to come in toward the back. I know. This is the way it is. That's me too. Now, if I put you on that track and I said, we're going to run to the end of that track, there's a finish line, and the first person to get, but we're not going to, there's no curve. What if this racetrack went off into the distant woods out there? It went off infinitely. What if that was the track we had? It went off infinitely past the finish line and infinitely past the start line. It's like an infinite racetrack. That's what you're standing on, at the starting line, and you're getting ready. You put your blocks in the ground. You push them down, put your little, you're set, you're good. You put your feet in the blocks, you're ready to take off. I get my starting pistol up in the air. I'm ready to start your race. You ready? Get set. Stop. I'm not going to go. I want you to do me a favor before you start. Everyone back your blocks up 6 inches. Really? Yeah, just do it. Okay, you do it. Ready? Set. Stop. Back it up 6 inches. Are you kidding me? Yeah. And then every time that I'm about to start the race, every time, rather than let you get started, I tell you to stop and move your blocks back 6 inches. I never let you start. I make you move your blocks back infinitely. Are you ever going to get to the finish line? Think about it. Are you? No. If there's no start to the race, you're never going to get to the finish line. What if the finish line is just today? If there's no start to the race, you don't get to the finish line. And if there's no start to time, you can't get to today. The fact that we are at today demonstrates that there's a beginning to time. Are you with me on that one? Law of infinite regress. We know we are in a universe in which space, time, and matter has a beginning. So here's our diagram. We didn't even talk about helium, which we could, or mathematics, which we could. But I just want you to see the case is, remember Dennis talked about a cumulative case? When we do these in front of juries, they look like this. They are cumulative cases built on several lines of evidence that all point to the same conclusion. Now look, people will say all the time, well, Jim, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't think. How do I know that I hear objections all the time. And by the way, atheists do not like the idea that we have a beginning to our universe. They are working hard to get rid of the beginning. Because if there is a big bang, there's a big banger. We've got to explain what that is. And the big banger has to be non-spatial, non-material, non-temporal. So it's already starting to sound like God.